on this computer. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. All right, perfect. Well, welcome everyone. It's awesome to see so many people in the room as well as people on the phone. This is very exciting. So I'm part of the Chicago Tableau user group, and then Kevin is going to talk about the Tableau Data Visualization Society. But first, like I mentioned, I just want to thank everyone for coming. This is really exciting. We haven't had like a hybrid event in a very, very, very long time. In fact, since I've joined the Chicago Tug. So awesome. A little bit of background. Well, I guess first, the reason that we wanted to do this joint event is that there's just two really good communities here in the Chicago area. And when we had the opportunity to do an in-person and virtual event, we really just wanted to kind of bring people together. You know, if data viz people want to join the Tug, if Tug people want to join the DVS community, you know, that information is really great. You'll probably see very similar people amongst them. So kind of networking and making those connections is always good. A little bit about the Tableau user group community. So back before COVID, we had three leaders. We had MP, Tom, and Rena. During COVID, you know, things kind of slowed down. Everyone thought, you know, COVID will be over next week, the next week, the next week. And then things just kind of came to a halt. In 2021, Kevin Ford, this man right here, Tom Siepel, and MP brought back the Tableau user group. So ever since 2021, we've kind of had a comeback, you could say, an underdog story, I'd like to think of it as. And then I joined the Chicago Tableau user group about a year ago. So now Kevin and I are kind of spearheading this effort and just kind of trying to bring people together. If anyone here ever has interest in presenting or ideas for presentations, we're always all ears. We want to make sure that it's as helpful as it can be to you all. So yes. Oh, is there participants?
Yeah, click on participants. Anybody? Is there a way to put in this thing? Is there okay. What are they? How are they contacting you? You keep introing.
Yes. Well, I was just about to pass it over to Kevin to talk a little bit about the Chicago Data Viz Society.
Cool. Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin. Just to further confuse you, there are two Kevins in the room today. I am one of the co-leaders of the Chicago Data Visualization Meetup Group. And today we're partnering with the Tableau user group, TUG for short, in co-hosting this event, and we're very excited about it. For those who are not familiar with the Data Visualization Meetup at Chicago, it's a community that's started in 2017 by Molly. She is also the founders of the Data Visualization Society, which is a global community for people that are passionate in visual design and data practices to come together and then talk about what we like and show appreciation about the topic. And I believe since the lockdown, we haven't had any in-person event. I personally was actually one of the attendants of the in-person event for the Data Visualization Society, for the Data Visualization Meetup group before the pandemic. But unfortunately, when it locked down, we all just went virtually. And that's why this event is very unique. And I know that we had a little bit of rough start in terms of technology, but we'll figure that part out and it'll get easier and easier. And starting this August, the Chicago Data Visualization Meetup Group, we officially become a affiliation to the Data Visualization Society. There are a lot of items with the same names going around, but basically we are now DVS affiliated. What that means is now we get to share some of the resources with the DVS group, and then you'll get to access to the global networking opportunities for the people that are practicing in the same industry. So later, one of us will share a links of all of the useful links to all of the groups, Slack chats of these groups in the Zoom meeting, and as well as all of the websites, so that you can check out each of these groups. Registrations are all free. You do not need to pay for anything to join the Chicago Database Meetup or the Tableau user group. So don't worry about it. Okay, you're not going to be asked to pay something. Just you may have to, unsubscribe some emails by the end of the month, but we'll talk about that later. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Kevin Ford.
Yeah, thank you for the intro. Yeah, and if we get anything out of this, right, the Tug people have been meeting as a Tug group for a while. If you're in more of the Data Viz Society, right, this is getting these meetups back up and running. And then if you want to cross over, right, so it's easy to find the Tableau user group, right? Salesforce is very good at making sure you can find communities to learn their software. In the reverse is, right, the Data Viz Society webpage, free membership. You get on the Slack channel. There's actually a Chicago group already chatting on the Slack channel. One of our presenters today, that's how we found folks. And then there's, the Nightingale magazine. So definitely come join us. I'm going to do a very light intro for Eli, mostly to make up some of that tech troubleshooting time. Eli is more on that Data Viz Society side of the house. I've actually more met Eli through reading things like the Nightingale magazine, the Data Viz Society page. Eli and I bumped into each other actually on Slack, I think, for Data Viz Society. I was interested in some of the work that he was doing, which is not Tableau related, right? So it gets very agnostic. And then just through complete coincidence, he was asking a few of us a math question, and I got really fascinated with his research. I have no credit whatsoever. He keeps trying to give Ken and I credit. We have no credit for it. We're just fascinated with the research that he's done for data visualization. So he has a story about, be aware of this while you're designing. There is something that you could do that's unintentional. It really changed how I approach some of my designs, and can't thank him enough. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it straight to Eli. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Is there a way to screen share? Can I have the permission to do that?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Screen share. Good call out. I probably got to make you a host because we're a little bit newbies with this one. Let's see. Participants. Eli, you are going to make the host. So now you should have the share screen green button.
There we go. Maybe.
Awesome. And we can see it in the room.
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So we can all see. Good. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I'm Eli Holder. I'm a data designer, sometimes researcher, and my firm is 3 as a Pattern. We help clients to design and develop data tools that play nicely with humans. So sometimes these client projects raise interesting questions, and those questions turn into research projects. And we're going to unpack one of those research projects today. So almost every book. That was my intro slide. So almost every book on data viz will include one of these 3 charts. These are John Snow's cholera maps, William Playfair's trade balances, and Charles Menard's Napoleon map. When people think of good data viz, they think of these because good data viz is supposed to be intellectual and enlightening, and that's fine. But I'm personally much more interested in the non-intellectual ways that the data viz can influence our attitudes and our behaviors. So, for example, these charts on the left are quite remarkable because they show that some impossibly high percentage of Americans have basically become exercise crazed. The charts aren't pretty. They're not remotely true. But they accomplish something of a behavioral holy grail in that they get people to go to the gym. In a recent study of 64,000 members of 24-Hour Fitness, people who saw this chart increased their weekly gym attendance by 24%, which is massive for, again, something like going to the gym. And so these work not because they're beautifully designed, they work because they're psychologically effective. They highlight a social norm that people happen to be sensitive to, and people change their behavior to match this perceived norm. This is another chart that I've thought about quite a bit, thanks to a collaborator of mine, Peter Blakely. So charts like this can be influential, but maybe not in the way that you might expect. What's remarkable about this chart is that by conventional design standards, it's a pretty good chart. It's clean, it's simple, it disaggregates, it highlights some contrasts, and these would all be good things to aim for if this chart weren't about people, and particularly people from marginalized communities. And so there are a lot of these conventionally good charts that show social outcome disparities between different social groups. But instead of rallying support for more equitable outcomes like you might expect, these charts can actually backfire. The way that they're framed can lead to toxic conclusions about the people being visualized. So Cindy, Sean, and I presented a paper on this at last year's Viz conference, and it has some wider implications for visualizing social outcomes that we'll unpack during the talk. But to get us into the right mindset, I want to start with this question of, can information backfire? So what are some examples of information that's accurate and well-intentioned, but still harmful? And feel free to put them into the chat if you would like. I'm always curious to hear what people say on this, but I'm gonna keep pushing through. All right. So one of my first favorite examples is comes from Arizona's Petrified Forest National Park. So they wanted to see if they could use clever signage to persuade people to stop stealing petrified wood. So one of the tactics they tried was basically a guilt trip. They posted a sign saying that many past visitors have removed petrified wood from the park, changing the natural state of the petrified forest. And this is accurate information. People were actually stealing. It's well-intentioned. But this sign actually leads to 4 times more theft than if they just posted a sign saying, hey, please stop stealing the wood. Another example of this is from a new study that we just published. So this is so political polarization is obviously a big issue in the United States. And so you'll see a lot of charts like these in the news showing these big attitude gaps between Republicans and Democrats on their support levels for different issues. And what we found was that charts like these can actually make people more polarized. And so news reports that attempt kind of in good faith to report on these big issues might actually be making them worse. And then finally, more relevant to our topic today, there's a common belief that raising awareness of inequality will kind of automatically solve inequality. And that's not always the case. So for example, during COVID, some early studies found that the more that white people in the United States were aware of racial disparities in COVID outcomes, the less willing they were to support public health interventions. And they found that it didn't just erode support for more health equity, it actually reduced support for all COVID-related health interventions. And so this backfire effect, sorry, I was looking at the comments. So this backfire effect from comparing social groups isn't a new thing. So in health and equity research, particularly in education, this is usually referred to as deficit thinking or deficit framing. And this describes an effect where highlighting outcome disparities leads to essentially victim blaming. So when people see that outcomes are different between groups, they assume that it's caused by some personal deficiencies with the groups that happen to have the worst outcomes. And this stereotyping effect is what Cindy and I showed in our paper, and we'll unpack how this works in DataViz next. But our first big takeaway is that information can easily backfire, even if it's accurate and even if it's well-intentioned. And so probably the most important message that I can share is ideally, I'd like to make all of you just a little bit more anxious about putting new data out in the world, especially if you're not sure how it will be perceived, and especially if the information involves people and people from marginalized communities, because information can backfire in ways that are hard to predict. But what do we do about this? How do we avoid these backfire effects? I don't think that we particularly need more rules about which charts are good or bad, and I actually think some common conventions can be harmful in this context. I think the more important thing is that we understand how information is perceived in general, and that's a question of psychology as much as it is design. And so we'll look at 2 specific concepts from psychology and see how they play out in DataViz. The first that we'll unpack are attribution biases. So in Intro to Psychology, you might have heard things like the fundamental attribution error or correspondence bias. And these are concepts from social psychology describing how we form judgments about other people. And this is important because it turns out that even when we're just looking at charts about other people, a lot of these biases still apply. And this is core to understanding how something like deficit thinking can play out in a chart. And so we'll start here. And so let's take a second to think about this chart on the left. This shows average hourly wages for 4 different groups of restaurant workers. You can see that, for example, Group A earns about $7 an hour more than Group B. But why is that? Why do we think that Group A earns more than Group B? So a lot of people will explain these differences in terms of personal attributions about the people within the groups. For example, you might say that Group A earns more because they're harder working, or they have better customer service, or they smile more. And these are close to real answers that we saw. But in reality, these differences are probably more reflective of external factors like how nice is the restaurant? How busy is it? Is it in a wealthy neighborhood? And so deficit framing for data viz is presenting group outcomes in a way that encourages these personal attributions. It encourages blaming outcomes on people. And this is essentially a version of the attribution biases that we just discussed. And so this is a problem because these group level personal attributions are essentially stereotypes. If you believe that these outcome differences are caused by differences in personal characteristics, then you implicitly believe in harmful stereotypes that the people with the worst outcomes are somehow worse people. And so we'll walk through an example of this in a little bit more detail. So this is the same chart, but we're changing the colors to emphasize a purple Group A versus a blue Group B. So you might look at a chart like this, and your first read would be average outcomes for purple Group A are better than average outcomes for blue Group B. And that's accurate. That's a fine read of the chart. But a lot of people will go a step further and explain the differences in terms of personal attributions. So the takeaway then becomes A has better outcomes than B because the people in Group A are somehow better than the people in Group B in some way that would produce these outcomes. And there's obviously nothing in the chart supporting a causal conclusion like that. And then the real damage is that if you believe that the outcome differences are because Group A is somehow better than Group B, you implicitly believe the people in Group B are somehow personally deficient. And that's obviously a problem because that's a harmful stereotype about the people in Group B. And so to put that in a broader context, the deficit thinking effect suggests that even though charts like these only show differences in outcomes, they can be misread as evidence for intrinsic differences between groups of people. And so we've walked through this conceptually. It's consistent with social psychology, but how big of a problem is this out in the wild? These are results from our last 3 experiments where we tested multiple different types of charts showing outcome differences between groups of people, like the chart that we just looked at. And so this chart shows the distribution of how strongly our participants agreed with personal attributions, like these outcome differences are because Group A works harder than Group B. And so you can see that this curve kind of leans more towards agreement. And the majority of people, 53%, agreed with personal attributions that blame the outcome differences on the people themselves. And again, since this chart gives no evidence for causal conclusions like this, this implies belief in a harmful stereotype about the people being visualized. Which gives us our next takeaway, which is that charts showing differences in outcomes can be misread as evidence for personal differences between groups of people. And this confirms that this deficit thinking effect can be triggered by otherwise neutral charts that don't provide any evidence to that. And then our next theme in this next section, we'll look at how our design choices when we're making data viz can actually impact this process of blaming. And so we'll talk about perceptions of uncertainty or actually variability. And so the world is messy and complex, but that's really hard for our brains. And so we like to simplify things. And unfortunately, sometimes we oversimplify things in ways that can be misleading. And it turns out that certain charts can have a similar misleading effect. And this misleading effect can look a lot like stereotyping. And so to unpack this, to unpack how a chart might nudge somebody towards a stereotype, first we'll look at stereotypes in general. So for example, let's consider a stereotype that people in this purple group are especially high earners. Stereotypes assume that within a group, people are more similar than they really are, and between groups, people are more different than they really are. The stereotype implies a distribution like this one on the right, where not only do people from the purple group earn more, their earnings are very similar, and therefore all purple people earn more than all other people. But actually, in reality, even if the average earnings for people in the purple group are higher than average earnings for everyone else, the distribution will still look something like the chart on the left. you can see that earnings are widely distributed within groups and that between groups, there's a lot of overlap. And this will generally be true for social outcomes, especially when the groups are based on something as loosely defined as race. And so then our next question is, could certain charts create a similar misperception? And so I'll walk through another example, this time looking at earnings for 4 different groups of people. And so this distribution on the left is close to reality for something like income differences between something like racial groups. And so again, you can see that there are a lot more differences within groups than there are between groups. And so if we take these distributions and plot them as a bar chart of average income for each group, we'll end up with a chart like this one in the middle. But when people see this bar chart, they may not imagine the distribution on the left. They may imagine something more like this. Without any indication of variability, it's very easy for people to assume that it's not there. And just like with stereotypes, charts like these can create a false impression that people within groups are more similar than they really are, and that between groups, people are more different than they really are. On the other hand, if we show these same distributions as a jitter plot or any other chart that shows the range of outcomes within groups, then it becomes very apparent that within groups, there's a lot of variation, and between groups, there's a lot of overlap. And this actually parallels real life, where the more exposure you have to people from other groups, the easier it is to see anybody as an individual, and the harder it is to stereotype them. And so to tie this back to the previous section, when we talked about correspondence bias and deficit thinking, we showed that somebody could go from seeing differences in outcomes to kind of false beliefs about people's personal characteristics. And what we're proposing here is that there's actually a middle step that facilitates at least part of that, where chart design can create an impression of an outcome stereotype that then leads to a stereotype about personal characteristics. And so in our research, our basic hunch was that charts that emphasize within group variability, like the jitter plot on the left, should help readers see that outcomes are very different within groups and they overlap heavily between groups. And this should reduce personal attributions or stereotypes. On the other hand, bar charts or any other chart that hides outcome variability should increase stereotyping. And so we tested 6 different chart types showing 4 different topics of social outcome disparities. The charts on the left emphasize variability. These include jitter plots and prediction intervals. And if you're not familiar, you can think of prediction intervals as almost showing the range. It's not that exactly, but it's how a lot of people tend to read it. It shows more of the actual kind of how wide the distribution of outcomes are. And then this chart on the right, the ones on the right hide variability. And these include bar charts, dot plots, and confidence intervals. And so we generally confirmed our main hunch across 3 different experiments where we compared high variability charts like the blue jitter plots or the prediction intervals to low variability charts like the orange bar charts, the dot plots, or the confidence intervals. We consistently found that the charts that emphasize variability reduce stereotyping relative to the charts that hide variability. Which brings our next big takeaway, which is when visualizing social inequality, design choices can reinforce harmful beliefs about the people being visualized. And this can look like stereotyping. And so the good news, though, is that this gives designers at least a little bit of control in solving for these misperceptions. For example, we can show variability and reduce some of these tendencies. And so we have some choice in the matter. And so I'll pause for questions in about 30 seconds, but I want to emphasize a few points. One is it can be tempting to kind of try to reduce these social outcomes and do kind of simple averages or easy sound bites like group X earns more than group Y. And as communicators, our instincts kind of push us in this direction. We all value brevity and simplicity, but being overly simplistic robs readers of important context, and it can make these disparities worse by misleading audiences towards harmful stereotypes. So social outcomes are messy, especially in the context of big complex issues like inequality or systemic racism. And so rather than chase the false simplicity of the charts on the left, our design should lean into the messy truth and show more context and more detail. And so these charts on the left are overly simplistic to the point of being misleading. When presenting social outcomes, bar charts, dot plots, confidence intervals, these all emphasize between group differences and hide within group variability. And this leads viewers to harmful conclusions about the people being visualized. And so we should ideally do less of these. On the other hand, charts like the jitter plot and the prediction intervals on the right these show within group variability and make it easy to see how much outcomes actually overlap between groups. And so this reduces tendencies to blame the differences on people, on the people within the groups, and it makes it harder to misread charts as evidence for harmful stereotypes. And so when visualizing social outcome disparities, especially involving people from marginalized communities, we want to do fewer charts that monolith people like these on the left, and more charts that show more variability like these on the right. So to wrap things up, the takeaways we covered were: 1, information can backfire; 2, showing differences in outcomes can be misread as evidence for differences between groups of people; 3 is that our design choices matter. They can reinforce harmful beliefs about the people being visualized. And then 4 is in general, we want to lean into the messy truth when the data is about people. And so what we covered today is meant as kind of an introduction to the social psychology and how it interacts with data viz. If you think this is fun, I have a few follows for you. One is you can hire me because I like to work on this stuff professionally as well. 2, more importantly, we have a new paper that we're going to be presenting at Viz next week. I just posted a slightly more digestible version of it. It's up on the website, 3iap.com/poll3. And then last, I think that with the research that we did and our most recent paper, there's kind of a general theme emerging where visualizing social comparisons can lead to just surprisingly toxic effects. So we talked about how it can impact stereotyping. We've shown that it can impact polarization. I think that there are papers out there that suggest that this can impact risk perceptions for health or kind of adherence to public health interventions. And so I think that's probably where the next push for research will be. But if you work in any of these spaces or with this data, I think there's better ways to show it than some of the popular approaches. And I'd love to connect and talk with you and kind of hear your take on it. And so that's all I got. I want to say thanks to these folks who helped kind of make all this happen. And my email address is eli@3iap. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right, awesome. So I'm gonna do a couple things. One I can't see. So Eli, you can hear us in the room?
I can hear you.
All right, awesome. Oh, good. And the video popped on. I am going to pause the recording. Eli had the good suggestion, right? We are talking about a topic that could easily be sensitive. And this should be like, wide open on questions to actually understand. To start recording again. Let me get host disabled. Oh, Eli, you might have to give the ball either back to me or look for Jade. Jade is, do I see Jade?
Jade.
Yeah, you're on there. All right. Oh, yeah. You're sharing your video. Woo-hoo. Yeah, Jade C. If you could pass it to her or me.
Let's say, I can't screen share at the moment.
Make host.
Jade is now the host. Yeah, your screen share button should work now.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, and just to finish the transition, so yeah, keep going in the chat, right? I don't know how much longer Eli will be available, but feel free to put some more questions or keep up that dialogue of the visualizing uncertainty. Moving to Jade. So yeah, want to welcome Jade. This presentation was at the Tableau conference. It was one of the ones that I attended. I'm a Tableau user at Discover. We have Miro. We have it more for like project management, and maybe we use it a little bit for but when I saw how she was using it in this story that she's about to tell, it was the first story I told when I got back to Discover. So really wanted her to kind of come and share. Hopefully you have that same excitement of how I did it, and you can pick up a lot of like workflow tools and design tools in this space. Yeah, Jade, you want to do a quick mic check just so I can make sure you're good?
Oh yeah, can you guys hear me? Hey everybody.
Yeah, we're all good on this side. Okay, have at it. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks Kevin again for having me. And that was really sweet what you said about the presentation. I'm glad that it stirred some excitement and you took it back with you, that it was helpful. Also really enjoyed your presentation, Eli. I thought that everything was really cool that you did there. But transitioning now, again, my name is Jade Corley. I'm a solutions architect for a consulting company called Analytic Vision. And we are a fully remote team. And so this topic is near and dear to my heart, how we combine Tableau and Miro together. And so hopefully this is something that if you're a Tableau developer, you can take back with you in your roles and your projects and what you do. And this presentation is all in Miro. Right, I'll start by just going through the slides and then we'll jump out and do some examples. So quick overview. These are the 6 topics we're going to hit and what I like to call like from beginning to end, my dashboard process. We'll hit best practices that our team and I personally use around dashboard discovery, data source modeling, wireframing, user client feedback, dashboard project management, and documentation. But why does this matter? So working remotely, I don't know if you guys are on hybrid or remote teams, but I know for me, some of the pain points that I experience just in this remote role is being like kind of feeling siloed or alone at times. Maybe it's sometimes hard to engage and collaborate with your teammates and create relationships with them. And then not only your teammates, but also it can be challenging to create relationships with your stakeholders or clients that you're working with when you build these dashboard projects. And then specifically working remote relating to the dashboards, maybe like as you're building your Tableau dashboard, you're realizing like, wait, what was the why and who was our intended audience that we started with to begin with? Maybe you're having trouble remembering data source elements or finalizing design, keeping up with feedback, and everybody's favorite, maybe you've got dashboard links lost in your email, or putting together your documentation. So I know I've experienced pain points around all these elements, and we use Miro to kind of make that easier. And so again, the 3 key elements that we think that can help alleviate pain points is 1, a hybrid or remote team willing and ready to engage. Tableau, of course, to build your beautiful dashboards and get insights to your end users. And then Miro, which is an online collaborative whiteboarding platform. Like think Google Doc that multiple people can work on at the same time, but on steroids. So let's take an example project and walk through this process from beginning to end. Imagine you work for a nationwide office supply company. Let's call it Superstore. Due to popular changes in office culture post-2020, you've been told you can now work 100% remote. You no longer need to come into the office to do your job successfully. It makes you wonder, wait, don't we specialize in selling office products? If there's a shift in working from home versus coming into company offices, will that have an impact on our sales? So starting from the beginning, let's meet with our end users and do a dashboard discovery. So this is typically the first step in a process where you work with the team to brainstorm and identify the vision, goals, scope, and audience that will create a successful outcome and dashboard. Our approach, we typically have like a 1-hour virtual session with key members from our team, usually the client lead and the dashboard developer, maybe a data engineer, and then the client stakeholders. And then we have a template in Miro that we walk through to answer these key themes and questions. And I like to stick a quote at the bottom of these to kind of summarize, but an example of the dashboard discovery is Simon Sinek's, let's start with why. So this is an example template, and I've got a QR code up at the top because this is a template in Miro that you can actually download and use that I created. And I'm going to go through this fast because I know I've only got like a few minutes, but the main purpose here is to hear the client's voice. So once we get on that Teams call, I'll share my screen, pull this up, and walk through questions around the who, the why, the what, your wishes, and then maybe the story and the UX. So the who is the audience. So for our project, maybe that's our leadership and sales team. So as I'm asking the client, who is your target audience? I'm typing notes and they're able to see like, am I understanding what they're saying? Are we creating alignment? So adding the sales team would be another audience. And you can walk through these with them. Then afterwards, you've kind of got your purpose and your why to build your dashboard with. The next step is data source modeling. So this is the process of creating a visual representation of either your whole info system or parts of it and how you want to connect your data points and the fields you need together. Sometimes this is, for our approach, is a 1 to 2 hour long working sessions with the data engineers, project leads, or subject matter experts to figure out what fields we need, any relationships and unions, joins we need to do, and talk about what data exists. Like if they're wanting some of the dashboard that isn't quite there data-wise yet versus what exists. So what can we actually build? It really creates a good relationship with the data engineering team early on when we can't build dashboards without them. So important to kind of collaborate on that. So I like Thomas Redmond's quote, where there is data smoke, there is business fire. We use Miro. This is their like shapes and arrows that kind of connect to build out a data model. I'll usually do this before the meeting and then have it pulled up and this is what I understand your data to be. Is this accurate? Does it exist? You know, maybe color code the sticky notes. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. And then I can also, like, as we talk through it, maybe we want to add quantity to our dashboard too. We need to make sure we bring that in. It's all documented beautifully there for you. Next is wireframing. This is my favorite one. I love the design process, so I'm going to spend a little more time here. But wireframing is a step in the dashboard process representing a draft, not an exact match of a final layout. It shows what the user interface will look like through rough images or screenshots. And so sometimes it's building the, like, maybe a low fidelity wireframe in Miro, like right there virtually with the client. But usually I take what I kind of gathered from the dashboard discovery and create a more medium fidelity wireframe in Miro. You can also use Figma or even just draw with pen and paper, but I found that Miro's, like with their drag and drop tools, is just faster than Figma. So I'm not wasting as much time, but I'm still able to wireframe, create that picture for the end user and create more adoption and excitement. Here, Why Can't Work Be Fun from Bob Chapman. Everybody Matters. Such a good book. So here's a real world example. We had a client and one of my coworkers kind of interviewed them and sketched up what they wanted their dashboard to look like. Started out pen and paper. She gave this to me and I was able to take this and transfer it to Miro. So all here are just boxes, text, kind of just things stacked on top of each other. I spent maybe a couple hours putting this together, and then it seemed pretty easy to go from drawing to something like this. And we showed this to the client and they were like, yes, this is exactly what we want. Maybe we need to change the wording of this, or I don't like this chart. You just get really good feedback because they're able to see what's in your head. And I try to build and wireframe it in a way that I know is possible in Tableau. Like, I wouldn't ever want to wireframe something that's super hard to do in Tableau and not easily transferable, like in the business world. So what about our project? This would be a low fidelity example. Maybe we just start talking to the end users and look at what KPIs do you care about? And what's your business question? We know we want to look at sales distribution by segment. Has that changed? Has there been an increase in home office supplies? Is that offsetting anything? And then you can also have boxes to type in any kind of filters that they would want. Another example of a KPI we could include would be quantity. And then you have that documented. So maybe this is something I kind of work through with the client or end user. And the next step, I'm going to come out of presentation mode for a second and into Miro. Next, I would start building the wireframe in Miro. And it's pretty cool. They have a lot of apps, is what they call it, to make this pretty straightforward and easy. One of them is Miro's chart app. You can come in here. They know we want a pie chart. I can type in sales by segment. I can't change colors or anything, but I'm able to come in here, and if I know what the data looks like, I can type in what I can kind of like anticipate what the data looks like and give a real picture of what it could be for the end users to see and understand. It's their data, they're used to seeing it, they can understand it. And then you have an example. You can add this to your wireframe, drag and drop. It's pretty easy. I know we're low, so I'm gonna go fast on these. They also have a wireframe library app. It's this. It's for websites mostly, but I love their like radio buttons, check boxes, and drop downs because it looks just like Tableau's filters. I don't have to spend time creating anything. It's drag and drop. I can type in what I need, add it to my wireframe. And then if there's a chart that doesn't exist or something I need, I use the icon finder to just drag and drop that too. So version 2 of our wireframe could look something like this. Superstore has the change in office culture affected the business. We've got KPIs at the top, our sales by segment pie, and I have a couple bar charts over here. And also there's a Google Images. If you don't want to leave Miro, you could come here, type in Tableau statement. Let that load. Again, drag and drop. So now they can get a picture of what the Tableau dashboard is actually going to look like in the end. I'm going to jump back into present mode. Oh, wait, forgot this one. I'm going to show you guys. One other thing, if you're trying to design mobile, as long as you have a frame that set up in Miro as the phone version, there's tablet, browser, phone, and custom, you can click show device and it creates a wireframe like what mobile would look like. And that's been, that creates a lot of excitement too when we share it that way. Okay, user client feedback. So this one I'm gonna start with a quote, take joy in the journey, because sometimes you show version 2 and they love it and you get to build. Other times there's lots of back and forth on data and questions and, you know, different things. But it's important to, during this process, to really hear their voice, is to ensure the project is aligned with the needs and the expectations of stakeholders, and you're truly building something that they're going to want to use. It allows you to see how the end users think, how they'll use the dashboard, and help promote excitement and adoption. So our approach is we usually have weekly or bi-weekly check-ins where we show wireframes or versions of the dashboard and get feedback from there. And during these meetings, we like to offer best practices, create a win-win, and leave comments and notes in Miro. So an example would be during one of these meetings, I'd pull up the wireframe and say, hey guys, what do you think? I'd walk through maybe how to use it, filters, and then take notes as they go. Like, oh, we also want a category filter. You know, we need to have this by July. Maybe we want to add COVID information since that's around the time that we're looking at. And that gives me as the designer like, okay, cool. They like these aspects. They don't like the others. Let's get into Tableau and really start building. So when I start building in Tableau, I have to also think about this as a whole and manage the project. And so just like any other project management, just making sure you achieve all of the goals within the given time constraints. But with a remote dashboarding lens, it helps the developing analysts know what to expect, keep up with tasks, and communicate with the overall team. And this has truly been helpful with making an easy handoff. Like say I'm going on vacation and my coworker needs to take over for a deadline. This process I'm about to show you in Miro makes this seamless. We've used this tons and tons. And I like to use Stephen Covey's quote, begin with the end in mind. So we've got our wireframe, we've got our notes, and now I'm building in Tableau. I might have Tableau on my main screen, Miro over here to say, okay, I've got my logo and brand colors in. Awesome, let's check that off. So my sticky note legend is anything in blue is just a note. Oh, yep, I've got a deadline. Light yellow is an item to do. Yep, dark yellow is something that's in progress. Green is completed and red is no longer applicable. So I'm able to, you know, get to this point, save my dashboard. And when I go on vacation, a teammate can come up and say, okay, here's what I need to do next. You know, here's what she started on. I need to wrap up. And it just makes it super seamless. Okay. I like to throw this in here because we're going to jump from V2 to final version. So let's draw some circles and then the rest of the DAG of Al. And once you're done developing in Tableau, your dashboard could look something like this. Really quick, because we only have a few more minutes. But if we're going back to our original question, has it affected the business? It doesn't really seem like it's been affected that bad. We're trending up in sales and profit. quantity, we have more unique customers, maybe we could dig into that. But looking at home office specifically, that donut chart we wireframed earlier, has there been a change? And you can see a little bit, yes. But overall, still good. Business still looks great, even though people are working from home. So business is in a good spot. Okay, last but not least, documentation. So the goal, this is also everyone's, like, I guess, dreaded favorite, but the goal of documenting a dashboard is to guide another designer or future you on certain complex concepts and create a consistent way to maintain notes on changes made to data connections, metrics, and visuals. But it's essential for a successful client handoff and tying the project up to the bow. So our approach is I don't start documenting until it's finished, because I feel like there's always tweaks and different things that get tacked on at the end. But once it's published in production, that's when I will start documentation. And we follow a general template in Word. I scale it based on the sophistication of the dashboard, depending on if there's lots of parameters or LEDs and things like that. But then once that's wrapped up, I'll share a comprehensive Miro board in Miro board with all this information. And I'll add with this, it's one of our company's core values: own it with passion and finish with legacy in mind. So what that can look like is in Miro, I'll have a frame, which is what this is, what you're seeing, with a screenshot of the dashboard. And maybe we have our project scope and goals. So it's like, why were we doing this to begin with? Who was our audience? Who are we talking to? You can link it to another part of your Miro board where you documented all that, and you've got that link right there. Let's go back here. Same thing with data source lineage. You could link back to that data model in your Miro board. Maybe you want to include data definitions. They have these cards where you could come in here and type, what does quantity actually mean? And add that in there. And then finally, you could link out to your Tableau dashboard. But one other thing I want to show you, while you can't embed Tableau in Miro, you can embed Miro into Tableau. So you've got your dashboard published, but you want to have all your documentation right there next to it. What you can do is you can click this export board, embed, and then I like to set a start area because this board is actually really big. So you can pick, well, do it this way. You could pick a slide that you wanted to, or you can just, have the part that you're wanting to embed show up here. Click your start view. And then in here, you grab the URL, not the embed code. Make sure I've got that copied. Now let's go to our dashboard. So here I'm in Tableau Public, and I've got my Superstore dashboard, all interactive, but I want to see Miro documentation. Oh, let me sign in. I meant to do that earlier. So I'm going to edit my dashboard. I've got a tab here for the Miro documentation. All you have to do is drag a web page object, paste the URL, click OK. And if you, depending on if you have the free version of Miro or like Enterprise, you may be prompted to sign in, but you can click see the board. And now you've embedded all of your documentation, your data model, all of that right here in your Tableau dashboard. Let's see if I can get it. See what it looks like right here. It's just another tab. It's fully interactive, and you can give view permissions to whoever you need, or it can be, you can set it not available to be private if that's important. So now let me go back. So that's Tableau and Miro, dashboarding in a remote role. I will say we use Tableau and Miro together. I probably use it daily in my role. And I feel like it's really helped build better relationships, or at least understanding with clients and the dashboards that we're building. We want them to use them, and this brings them along the process, brings them along throughout the whole process. And we've seen it work really, really well. But thanks again, guys. Thank you, Kevin, for having me. Thanks for letting me hang out with the Chicago folks. Are there any questions? I feel like I went through that so fast.
No, we appreciate you helping out with time since we started late. We've all been shipping at the tech switchover. Yeah, I'll do the same thing. So I got the same jitters kind of coming back, especially that last part of about embedding it. For someone who's a designer or a project manager, right, to actually have them weave together like that, is really well done, and yeah, nicely presented. So yeah, huge thank you. What questions do people have? Yeah. Jade, do you want to do? What's the difference between Miro and Figma?
Oof. Okay. So I like Figma a lot too. It reminds me of more like Illustrator. So if you're wanting to have an image on your Tableau dashboard that's like high with graphic design and curves and color, like if it's going to be a more sophisticated design, Figma all the way. But Miro, when you're just trying to do some boxes, bar charts, and low fidelity, I think Miro is faster because you don't have to make all those boxes. It's drag and drop.
Good one. I'll also chime in that just to get into Miro is free. I guess technically to get into Figma is free. Right? Okay, well, Adobe will shut that down. I also do a personal board in Miro. It's that easy to get up and running that right, even use it for like light personal stuff. What other questions? Yeah, anybody on the phone? Just use the raise hand in the reactions section. Might help if I actually show this section.
And I do have like this, basically like the presentation, like drilled down a little bit better on my blog. And oh yeah, the QR code for like the dashboard discovery, if you want to dig into that more. I have like how to use it, lots of different more tips that kind of dig into this presentation a little more. That's not so fast.
Okay. Jade, about how many people might be like working on the Miro as like a team, working with a business partner or a client to get to a dashboard? Since your theme was like the remote kind of collaboration, connecting with people,
Yeah, I mean,
working. Yeah, go for it.
So I think when it comes to like the dashboarding, because I mean, we've used Miro and there'll be tons of people on it for like team events and things. But dashboarding, probably like 3 or 4 is what I've seen. Like I'll come in and kind of the client might leave. Sometimes I even just send them the link to the wireframe in Miro. We don't have to have a meeting. It can be asynchronous, and they'll leave a comment to say like, oh, I like this, or can we change this to brand colors? So sometimes me and my teammates are on doing different things, like someone's wireframing and someone's kind of digging into maybe a data issue, and we're working in different spots on the Miro board, which is pretty cool. So you can usually drop the thing and say like, hi. But yeah, probably 3 or 4 for dashboard projects. It doesn't get too crazy.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Kevin?
David has a question about a hands-off. The process are pretty clear to hand over to dev from Figma. Do you run into troubles when given dev the Miro file?
Yeah, so the core of the question is an online question, so you might even be able to find it in the chat. But the general idea is in Figma, there's like a well-organized how do you do handoffs between the different phases of the different collaborators. What would you say is sort of like right, if you're a Miro and you're different, you're 3 to 4 people, is the handoff process or the kind of like the control process? Does it work pretty fluid?
You mean the handoff of like, I'm done with the project, now it's your turn?
Yeah, especially if you're
Okay.
like someone's a designer, someone's a data engineer, someone's a developer, like building the Tableau or D3 for some of our Data Viz Society friends.
Okay, so I think Figma may have Miro beat in that, or either I haven't figured out quite how to use that. Normally it's like, we all know the Miro board, and it depends on the designer. Like I set up frames, like here's the wireframe, here's the discovery, here's like feedback sessions, here's the engineering. I kind of have it organized just personally, but I know Miro boards can get crazy and out of whack fast. So normally we share, here's our board for our Superstore dashboard in a Teams chat, like click it when you need it. So
Totally. Okay. No, that's good, right? And maybe that's all the themes there is Miro's the more informal, faster version of Figma in terms of like how we're using it.
yeah, I think so.
All
Cool.
right. I think we're gonna stop there with time. Thanks again to Jade. I really appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
All right. And then one more presenter, and this time is the local. He's even with us. So Chira, it actually says on the slide he works at the Shure microphone company, which is actually now stale and out of date. But yeah, since we don't have tons of time, I'm actually going to pass it to him. So Jade, I think you're now officially the host. If you can find Chira, he's got his video cooking, if you can make him the host. And then
Oh,
Chira, you
dear.
want to do the audio from your laptop back there, right? Yep. Okay. I'll mute my mic for right now.
Okay.
All right, let's give it a try. Can you guys hear me?
Can anybody on the phone or on the online hear us?
We got a thumbs up.
Got a thumbs up, Jade? Oh, Dave's got, all right, awesome.
All right, great. Thank you guys. Sorry, give me a second to figure this out. How do I remove the Zoom?
What do you need?
How do I remove this right over here from the side?
Oh, if you hover over the pictures.
I mean, actually, we won't see it, so does it matter?
Oh,
No,
is
if
that
you
my-
guys don't see it, that's perfectly fine.
Can you get rid of this?
Yeah, can you minimize that? We just need to see its face, or not.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Good.
All right, good day, everyone. Today, I'd like to share with you my journey with Viz for Social Good, from being a complete beginner to becoming a presenter at their last event. But before we move on, I do want to note that a majority of the images that I am using in this presentation have been created using ChatGPT's DALL-E 3 AI. And my reasoning for doing this was I wanted to add to my presentation a bit of narrative using images to add to the storyline. So that's kind of what I did to kind of convey how I felt in that moment, the emotions I was going through, and just like what was happening. All right, with a quick show of hands, how many of you are actually familiar with Viz for Social Good? All right, so quite a few of you. But for those of you that are new to it or hadn't heard of it like I was, Viz for Social Good is a community that empowers volunteers to help organizations drive social change through data visualizations. They post challenges from nonprofit organizations, and from all the volunteers that submit, 3 are chosen to present in front of the nonprofit organization. And I first came across Viz for Social Good at the Chicago DataViz Hangout online. And my first introduction wasn't timely at all because I wanted to participate in the Gord Downey and Cheney Winjuk event. But just due to the short amount of time that I had to work on the project and it being right around 4th of July, I wasn't able to work on that event. So at the Chicago DataViz Happy Hour with Kevin and the rest of the Chicago team, I let them know that I would work on the presentation with Sepe. And again, my first project was with Sepe. Sepe is an organization founded in Bogota in 2002. They promote international cooperation processes in Latin America and the Caribbean. And as a newcomer, the whole process was just really unfamiliar and a little bit, I'd say overwhelming. That's a really good word for it. However, Kevin Ford and Kevin Wee and the rest of the Chicago team, they really provided a lot of guidance, and that was a huge help. They educated us first about who Sepe was. Then they highlighted who the key stakeholders would be, both inside and outside of the organization. Then, as a group, we reviewed what problems we could solve for. Kevin Ford actually set up a separate meeting where he broke down how to solve for those problems. He told us that we should create intuitive, easy to understand dashboards so the stakeholders could understand it at just a glance. And leveraging those insights, I crafted and submitted my dashboard during my spare time after work. So kind of as the days passed by, it was about 2 days before the actual presentation, and Kevin reached out to me again. He invited me to the event, and I had travel plans the next day to go back home to Nashville, but I committed to attending the event online, and I signed up for it. And when I went into my email to check my RSVP, I had a surprise waiting for me. I discovered I was chosen to present that Friday. So I knew it was a little bit short on time, and again, I consulted Kevin Ford, who generously shared his insights from successful past presentations. And with that guidance kind of fresh in my mind, I prepared my presentation within a day and pushed back my travel plans to Nashville until after the event. On the day of the event, I was greeted by presenters from across the world and the host, Frederick Furry. And before the event started, we took some time to get to know each other a little bit better. We all talked about where we were from and how we got to where we were currently living, along with what motivated us to do that event. After that, we gave our presentations, including those by Victor and Christina, which were very insightful. Sepe provided some valuable feedback during a brief Q&A, but the highlight of the whole event was the overwhelming support from our team here in Chicago. So that was pretty awesome, guys. But let me show you guys quickly the dashboard that, if I could get it up, Sepe originally had, and kind of the one that Kevin guided me on. There we go. All right, so this is Sepe's original dashboard. And I'll just go a couple things that Kevin pointed out and I noticed myself, and even Sepe called out in their, I say, original presentation. So over here at the top, you see some bands, and these, oh, never mind. These bands, they are a little bit misleading just because they account for every single individual report versus having just the latest, I guess, reports. And a good example of that is Barbados over here. It shows the report from 2020, and it shows a score of 16.9, but this is a little bit misleading because you could come over here and see Barbados in 2023 submitted a report, and it was roughly 58. So that's a little bit outdated. Another thing that we noticed was just that these two graphs over here were a little bit redundant. They show the exact same data. And on top of that, you see all of the reports versus just the latest. Next thing that Sepe itself pointed out was the spider graphs, or the spider graph. And this itself was a little bit hard to understand. It's not intuitive at all, but it does look very cool. So there's that. And finally, you have this graph over here at the bottom. It's meant to show variance between two countries, so you're comparing two countries. But it is a little bit confusing to understand at first glance. It takes a little while to comprehend. So our goal was to create something like this, but a more simplified version. So with the dashboard that I decided to design, I had very limited time, so I decided to use their original dashboard frame and just make a couple minor tweaks to it. I took into account a couple things like typography and other things, but I wanted to focus mainly on the things that we had identified, Sepe had identified, and Kevin had pointed out to me. And that was just kind of adjusting the bands to show the correct information. We did this with a level of detail calculation. Then we went ahead and simplified the bar graph over here. Again, we took out all the, I guess, repeating values. Instead of using a spider chart, we added a bar chart, which made it very, there it goes, which made it very simple and very intuitive to understand. And after that, with the country comparison, instead of using what they had made, I just decided to use a dual bar graph with a variance bar graph to the right of it. And this made it really easy to understand where they were doing better and what areas weren't at just a glance versus having to actually think about what was happening in the data. And we also added a total over here just to show the overall difference. Going back to the presentation. All right, sorry about that. All right, so in the dashboard creation process, I came up with this completely original formula that's not Kevin's whatsoever. And in step one, you want to understand who your end users are and prioritize their needs for the dashboard. Then you want to take the time to define the problems they have, and you want to develop possible solutions to those problems. When you build your dashboard, you want to ensure simplicity and intuitiveness in the visualizations. It should cater to the audience that you identified in step one. And during the presentation, focus on the product's value to the end user. As Kevin put it, Steve Jobs spoke about the iPhone's benefits. He never spoke about its creation process. That is how he was able to captivate his audience's attention. And finally, if you're able to get feedback, take that feedback and go back to step one and just refine your process to cater to your end users. During this whole process, I learned a lot from Kevin Ford and Kevin Wee, and a lot of that falls directly in line with UX design process. One of my colleagues at Lockheed Martin, Cassie Reffner, recently pointed out to me that UX and UI design is something that we use, all of us almost use in data design. It's just that some of us do it more intuitively than others. But by following the guidelines, we can add structure to our work and constantly improve the process so that it's repeatable. And for me, this has kind of been a game changer because when I first started as a data analyst, I felt like I was fumbling around in a dark room trying to figure out what charts to use or what story to kind of work off of. But this process has shed a lot of light on it and helped me streamline my dashboard creation process to be more user-focused and all around more effective. So key takeaways. First one is, if any of you here are available for the next Viz for Social Good, I would highly recommend it because the journey was really transformative. This was because the nature of the project itself. I got to collaborate with a lot of seasoned professionals like Kevin Ford and Kevin Wee, and this helped me grow a lot in the process. The networking opportunities and recognition added some value to this already enriching experience, but the biggest thing was the joy of giving back with Frederick and the rest of the Viz for Social Good team. This made this something I really enjoyed. So I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. But I also want to give a special thanks to these people because without them, it wouldn't have been possible.
Come back and Chira, so we don't have weird feedback. So number one, I think that's the new Chicago Tug official visualization for the group to get together. The only thing I was going to do to kind of wrap up, one, like the story is great, right? There's other people that they kind of have to leave. So Ken is another person in the Tug and the Data Viz Society. Yeah, the empty chair over there. He too has actually been selected and has presented as one of the 3 finalists in Viz for Social Good. So I've always been a fan of it. It's real data. They're real clients, right? They talk to Viz for Social Good of like, yeah, we're not data viz people. We don't have an analytics department. So that's why they love getting volunteers to come in. Looks even better on your portfolio because you're like, yeah, I actually talked to these people. This is real stuff. And so it's been one of my favorites. The last one for the year started this morning at 8 a.m. And so the same thing that he's describing, I'm going to actually do again. Nobody goes to the original presentation because it's usually at a very difficult hour to get to, especially if you have a job. A couple of us will actually watch it in its entirety and then host a meeting of like, everybody come in. I'm going to give you the cliff notes of what they were talking about. We're going to walk through the data that they actually posted up online. Here's the YouTube link in case you want to go back and you want to watch the whole thing, and you can ride the wave exactly how Chira was doing it. His story is actually probably the one I would recommend, right? He watched one round just to size it up, but was like, it's the 4th of July, but at least I'm thinking about a workflow. It was the second one where he actually hit it ground running and actually was picked in the first time he actually did it. So definitely welcome to come join us. So if you're in the Tug people, you'll see me posting on LinkedIn for Chicago Tug, and also I do the suburban one as well. I'll post it up there. If you're in the Data Viz Society people, you'll see it as one of the meetup events. So check it out. Yes.
And you will share it on Slack.
Oh, yes. And if you get into Slack through the Data Viz Society, right, our Chicago Slack channel, that's actually where you picked it up, right? You and Ola kind of joined, and then Bob, I think, picked it up later as well. So join us. There will probably be a wave of us doing it this last time. I keep trying to get up the courage and I never get around to doing it. So this one I'm hoping is going to be mine as well. So for the event, right, for all three speakers, the fact that we're personally in, we want to thank Jessica and Salesforce for letting us have the cool room. For those who actually joined virtually, try to come next time. This view is the most kick-ass view I've seen ever out of a Chicago building. Right down, there's one river that way. We'll see that one. There's one river that way. It's really cool. Thank you for coming. I wish there was more time for networking. Definitely, like, we'll get down to the bottom. We can network there, or we can network online. What were you saying? Hey, Jessica, go ahead.
Is it possible to get a photo of everyone for the?
Sure.
And I think we have a little bit leniency when it comes to the time, so we don't have to.
Yes, it's
shut
not a
down.
huge rush, and they asked that if you can put your badges inside, like by the security, they said it's some type of basket.
Yep, I think we saw it.
Okay. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up and turn off the recording and thank everybody who was online. Oh, is there one more? Sorry. Yeah.
Not specific to Tableau. Kevin actually invited me today.
Hey.
Yeah,
You
I
did.
have no recollection of that.
Slack and invited me today.
Okay. Is that on the Data Viz Society side?
No, I do the CRM analytics user group for
Oh.
Chicago.
Okay.
The next one, again, due to Jessica, is here,
Excellent.
but it's on Halloween.
Oh,
From 2 to
Halloween.
4.
Okay, so you have to dress up for the CRM analytics groups.
Required, optional.
Anything's welcome. Actually, might as well open it up online and in the room. Anybody else have any other user groups or knows? You run the marketing research one.
Yeah, market research user group. We don't have anything planned.
Okay.
But you just look for market, do surveys or anything related to market research.
Yeah, Eli might come check you out because his stuff is all survey research based. Okay. Anybody on the phone?
And then my team actually has the Tableau Education and Universe. They changed it. So it used to be the academic user group, and now it is open to university and EDU, but it's also open to the public because sometimes we ask you all to come in and be a faculty or a professor for the day. The students absolutely love it. So I get instructors and deans and program chairs around the globe literally messaging me every day, like, do you know anyone who can come teach a class, or anyone can be a lecturer or partner with
I'm
us?
lecturing in the marketing at
Yes, for
UIC in about 3 weeks.
And so it's
And the last one you invited me to, they were seeing all the cool stuff that like the Flaherty twins do and like all those like really advanced visualizations, and they're all thinking that's what the expectation is in their very first job interview. So I just showed up with like, all right, here's 3 dashboards from Discover. We run the entire company of these things. They're like, it's just a bar chart. Yeah, you can run the entire company with just bar charts and line graphs.
And
They
we
loved
do
it.
have lots of judging and exactly what Kevin was explaining. That is what the students, and so they're running away from data science. They're running from data because they think, like, they see Workout Wednesday or they see Kevin Week, and they run and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'll be able to do it. But you mentioned it today as well. What I try to do is I travel to the different competitions. I'm like, no, you have to know your audience. And typically your business leaders have no idea what those things mean. Like, so a bar chart is just fine. But having even just, they're getting real cases from industry, and then they would love to meet industry leaders. Some of the things that Kevin even mentioned that I heard you say is so invaluable, even about the resumes. And just understanding the world. So if anyone is interested, my name is Jessica Lyons, my first name. You all checked in with my name. So last name Lyons. Please email me. I would love, I know faculty members, I actually teach as well. And I would love to partner with some of you as well to help bring data skills into the class. Yes, photo, please. If it's okay.
I apologize, folks on the room. You won't be able to join us for the photo. We'll have to figure that one out some in the next round. But yeah, thank you very much.
Actually, the way Salesforce usually does it,